Personally, I think one of the main problems with doing your own video game reviews, and this is more commonplace in older games, is that people tend to only review games that they have already played and have a preconceived opinion on. So with that in mind, I chose to review a game that I've not only never played, but one I've never heard of. GoodOldGames.com recently hosted a flash sale of titles with a limited window of opportunity to catch them before they return to their still very reasonable full prices, and Time Commando was one that caught my eye. The screenshots had an oddly nostalgic appeal to them at first glance, like I had seen something similar before. That's when I noticed it was made by Adeline. Yeah, you remember them, they made the Little Big Adventure games, those massively underrated and forgotten about adventure games, too imaginative, friendly and enjoyable to even be considered for a remake by today's standards. With that said, if you switch to aggressive mode you can kick the shit out of an elephant man, so maybe friendly wasn't the right word to use, but either way I have very fond memories of Little Big Adventure 2. Looking at it now, it's not overly groundbreaking, but there has to be something said for the design that still holds up. Even though everything is a basic shape and the characters don't really make too much sense, they all have a very realistic presence, almost like the strangest toys your nan ever bought you being animated in an incredibly bizarre yet realised world. So with that in mind, I was instantly intrigued to see what other games Adeline had mustered up, and if Wikipedia is anything to believe, Time Commando and Moto Racer for Game Boy Advance are the only two games they've ever made. Before the game reaches the main menu, we are treated to an opening FMV, which I'll be honest, I had to go back and watch a second time round before doing this review, as I really didn't have much of an idea the first time round what was going on. You work for the Historical Tactical Centre, where a normal day at the office seems to begin by slipping into something far less comfortable, with a golden skin-tight jumpsuit and two straps placed firmly up the arse. It's always funny watching past views of future living. They often have innovations that are standard today. In this case, it's touchscreen handheld technology, although we haven't developed the squishy screens like they have here. After falling asleep at your desk, a bloke who seems to have made his hair out of several purple bobble hats does something sinister involving a wireframe shark and a gorilla. The shit hits the fan and a ball of white energy engulfs some woman and you make haste to investigate further, resulting in you being sucked in along with her. When you awake, you find yourself back in the prehistoric era, and thus our adventure begins. High concept premises were not too uncommon back in the 90s, and can not only be forgiven, but with today's range of boring ideas, are welcomed with open arms. As with many games of yesteryear, Time Commando starts without a tutorial, so to give you the basic rundown, this is a third-person action-adventure time game where you traverse a mostly linear path fighting enemies and acquiring weapons along the way. When you complete an age, you are progressed further into the future, and each age is comprised of 2 levels. That's right, levels, remember them? They used to put them in computer games and they'd end in a boss fight. Combat is fairly basic. You have a total of 4 attacks per weapon, and these are accomplished by holding down the control key and pressing up for heavy, left or right for accordingly placed medium attacks, or down for blocking. Holding the Alt key remaps the arrow keys in a similar manner to your additional movements, forward being jump, left and right to quickly sidestep, and down to jump backwards. Weapons can be selected by using numbers 1 to 6, and the spacebar allows you to interact with certain objects. I won't bury the lead here by telling you this is one of the funniest games I have ever played, more than likely for unintentional personal reasons, and those reasons sit mainly with the enemies you face. I tittered when I kneed a saber-toothed tiger to death, chuckled at beating up a Roman woman who seemed to have done nothing at all to provoke me, but I literally laughed out loud at the unsuspecting gorilla who received a vigorous clubbing. Yeah, come on, club that primate, he had a wife and 2 kids! As you make your way through the levels, you will pick up a lot of computer chips. I was unsure at first as to what these did until it was too late. At the top of your screen you will have this jagged meter that will fill up. I mistakenly took this for how far along the level you had progressed, when in reality it is a timer, and if it is filled up opposed to running out, your health will drain rapidly. The computer chips allow you to lower the meter at what I guess are blue ripples in time scattered throughout the levels. Each time period comes with its own arrangement of appropriate weapons to acquire and enemies to fight. Although don't expect overwhelming historical accuracy here, I'm not too sure how many black Afro men fought for the Roman Empire, or for that matter Hulk Hogan wearing pyjama bottoms, but again, like clubbing a gorilla to death, these are small moments that made me smile, which can only be a good thing. Each level is built up of a 3D environment, which uses a really odd method of scrolling FMV to change your perspective. This effect is hit and miss, as the characters are quite smooth with fluid movements, and the FMV is a tad too low a resolution and only moves as fast as you can run through it. This creates an awkward problem whereby the game can only scroll through levels forward, meaning other than the space you currently have on the screen, you can never go back. This wouldn't be an issue, but often you will have items in the foreground and background, and depending on which place you need to stand in order to start the transition to the next area, you could lose items with no chance of going back to retrieve them. Luckily, this isn't too annoying as to become problematic. It more slows the rhythm of the game whilst you do a bit of cleaning up before going to the next area. What is problematic, however, is the bizarre choice of speed your character jogs at. It looks like the sort of run you would do when you're out for a jog and trying to cross the road without standing still to wait for cars. Maybe, if he hadn't decided to have 2 straps wrapped around his arse, he would be able to get a bit of momentum going. I think simply watching the footage you can get a feel for how the game is and how it plays, so let's not dance around the main question, is it fun to play? And you know what, it sort of is. First impressions are a bit lackluster, prehistoric weapons are not too exciting, and the bear you have to fight at the end of the level is probably the hardest boss in the entire game, but after this you realise that with each time period, the game itself also steps up a mark. I think it's once you hit the Roman Empire stage you're genuinely intrigued as to what arsenal you might get this time around and how the enemies will differ. And what I think makes this game work is a good choice of locations, and this game is 18 years old so I don't apologise if any of the following is a spoiler. The Roman era, for example, has you kitted out with various swords, a spear and an axe, fighting the Empire in their, for the most part, appropriate attire. After this you'll move on to the Japanese Middle Age, fighting ninjas, samurais with swords and throwing stars, and again I'm not too sure on the accuracy, but a dragon. The European Middle Age, as you would expect, has you fighting knights and armoured lads with flails, crossbows and a claymore. And you'll be using your swashbuckling weapons in the Conquistadors. The game after this takes a welcome turn. Having been primarily a melee combat focused game, we enter the Western Age and are treated to an arsenal of weapons ranging from pistols to shotguns, rifles and dynamite. This is somewhat of a double-edged sword. While it really helps to break you away from the game you were getting used to with its combat mechanics, it does become somewhat too easy. Prior to this, you would have been working your way through the battles with increasing degrees of necessary blocking and dodging, which had grown in complexity throughout each time period, but now all your weapons have become ranged, and as long as you are pointing your gun in the right direction, they will always hit and do the same damage. This isn't to say that the game fails to remain fun, it actually helps to remain interesting, and that's an admirable decision to make, but most of the levels can be completed in under 6 minutes and don't actually give you enough time to get bored of the repetitive gameplay. Now, knowing that we have flown through time to the point where there are guns, we have a whole new intrigue as to what 5 weapons they might have chosen and how far into the future we will actually end up going. The Modern Wars introduces soldiers affixed with bayonets, trenches to hide in, a plane to shoot down, and an attempt at a town battle. Modern Wars Level 2 throws you more into the present with AK-47s and... wait a minute. Yep, that's a picture of a completely stark bollock naked woman. Anyway, after that bit of porn, we find a rocket launcher and fight a tank, pleasingly followed by the level we have all been hoping for at this point, the future, complete with laser guns, flying monsters, xenomorph rip-offs, and what else? A cyber yo-yo. Time Commando is really silly, but I like it. In fact, I really like it, and that makes me rather happy, not only because I had a fun 2 hours or so playing through it, but because I managed to enjoy an old game that I had never played. And that feeling helps put to bed the theory that the only reason I play most retro games from my past is for nostalgia reasons. And for a game that doesn't take itself seriously, it had an unneeded amount of content. I couldn't name a game today which had such an array of weapons and locations. Not all of the locations work to their intention, and the last level starts with the most ridiculous jumping section and ends with the strangest last boss fight, but I was charmed throughout. The music in the game also warrants a mention. It's classic gaming music at its best, only there to exacerbate the point that you are playing a game and not to invoke some sort of narrative-driven emotion. Probably not for everyone, but as a PC game since the early 90s I can appreciate this for what it is. There is also an option to use the joypad rather than the keyboard, but I grew up holding Alt to strafe in Doom, so I was fine with the keyboard. Time Commando is only a few pounds to buy, so if you do want to try it, buy it from goodoldgames.com rather than seeking out a torrent. Not only will it help support them to bring out more classic games, but I think paying for a game gives you more motivation to play it than you would have if you watched the uTorrent bar reach 100% whilst you're sitting on the toilet. Thank you very much for watching. Feel free to leave me a comment response below, or if you do have any requests for an obscure game for me to do a review of, I'm always open to suggestions.